Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Software Defined Everything, the podcast for smart world systems. I'm your host, Steven Onzo, and today I'm joined by Thomas Bloor, Director of Automotive Business here at RTI. Thomas, can you give us a quick overview of your background and current role in the automotive industry?
Sure, yeah. I've been in the automotive industry for many more years than I care to remember at the moment. Started off with Intel and then did quite a spell at BlackBerry QNX, running their North American sales operations. And now I'm at RTI, helping to run the automotive business here at RTI. In addition to that, as part of my responsibilities at RTI, I'm actually the RTI person who serves on the board of COVISA, the industry standards body that's trying to define an open source vehicle specification for the car.
Right. So RTI has customers from a wide variety of industries, from healthcare to transportation, from robotics to aerospace and defense. But what is RTI doing in the automotive industry right now?
Sure. So, RTI would bring the same DDS, data-centric middleware solutions that we have, created 20 odd years ago to the automotive space, right? What does that mean, right? Well, it helps automakers really build the software-defined vehicle, helps them abstract the applications that they're writing away from the underlying hardware. One of the big challenges in the industry right now is effectively trying to get from the architectures of today, which were really designed, 6 or 7 years ago, towards that sort of central compute software-defined vehicle architecture. And most OEMs seemingly are going to take a couple of generations to get there. And sort of through using DDS, right, we help ease the complex transition through those architectures, right? We abstract those applications away from the underlying hardware. And also we make it easier to bring new applications and new features to these vehicles because, DDS, publish subscribe hierarchy, right? A new application can just subscribe to the information or the data that it needs to operate in the vehicle, and it eases that transition of bringing new applications into the vehicle.
You have a lot of experience in this industry. That being said, you've seen trends come, you've seen trends go. What are some of the biggest trends you're seeing in the industry right now?
I think right now, right, you see it in the media as well. There's a lot of talk about, competition from China. We see, the US and potentially some other, Western countries or economic blocs, putting tariffs on Chinese cars into those areas. And sort of there's a big fear that, China's, sort of actually doing really well from a technology adoption perspective, and maybe even a bit better or moving a bit faster than some of the incumbents in the West. I think, in my experience from the industry, right, the Chinese manufacturers have been working for probably 10 or 15 years to, bring their products up to the quality and the feature compatibility with sort of the people in the West. Also, I think, the Chinese are potentially aided by the fact that consumer behavior is a bit different, right? Seemingly, Chinese consumers are more willing to accept, a subscription service in the car. They are happy to provide, buy additional features than when the car was initially purchased. In North America, we've certainly seen, that some OEMs have tried to bring in subscription services, notably, heated seats, and that sort of created somewhat of a backlash from the consumers because they quite rightly felt, hey, the heating element's already there, the button's already there. Why would I have to pay extra for this, right? But I think as the industry is now sort of getting more mature and more its hands around the concept of an SDV, right? They're realizing that SDV features are new features, new capabilities, right? Not necessarily stuff that we're used to seeing in the car. It's new features that they're going to bring to the car and enable in that vehicle for basically added convenience, added functionality, and all that kind of stuff. I think that the other trend that we see sort of is quite different from, if you like, China to maybe the Western world is that the Chinese OEMs, I think they've jumped to the data-centric architecture mindset, sort of faster. A lot of those Chinese manufacturers are using DDS, right? And we were sort of one of the market leaders in the Chinese marketplace for DDS, which is helping them move faster, as I said before, right? New applications can be brought into the vehicle faster because they can really subscribe to the data that they need in that vehicle. So I think those are sort of the big ones at the moment, right? I think that the rise of also cloud-based user experiences in the vehicle is coming up. A number of those things have been trialed or at least demonstrated earlier this year from a number of the major European or North American OEMs as well. So things like ChatGPT in the car, right? The rise of AI, we can't avoid it in the automotive, same as we can't avoid it anywhere else, right? So AI-powered voice assistance in the car is definitely something that's going to come along as well, hand in hand with that sort of rise of the software-defined vehicle.
And how are software-defined vehicles changing the playing field for OEMs?
I think so. Software-defined vehicles, they're going through the hype cycle, right? I mean, I think there's been an awful lot of talk about them over the last, 3 years or so. I think we've kind of reached, peak expectations. Maybe we're getting down to sort of like the trough of disillusionment that's the next stage on that curve, and sort of avoid the pun, but the rubber hits the roads on these things, and people have to actually start bringing features to the marketplace, right? I think it's changing the landscape for the OEMs, because I think at the highest level, right, OEMs are now looking at this saying, hey, can we generate a sustainable revenue, new revenue streams from software-defined vehicles? That's really the promise that's leading the industry down that path, right? I think Stellantis has publicly said many times, right, they expect a $30 billion revenue stream from software-defined vehicles on their fleet, right? So that's a big number, right? And they've got to look at what services they can bring to the car that are going to make you want to buy that sort of stuff, right? And that's going to require quite a bit of sort of entrepreneurship from the big OEMs to look out what kind of services people are going to want to pay for in the vehicle, right? I mean, said before, right? The heated seats. People don't necessarily want to subscribe to the heated seats in their own vehicle, right? But say a service where I can pay for parking, right? So I'm driving around the city, I see an open parking space, I can pull straight into that space, and the car will come up on my dashboard and say, do you want to pay for this parking space? I don't have to fumble around with change, I don't have to pull out my phone and look at the side and try and download the mobile parking app and all that kind of stuff. I can just push a button on the dash and say, yep, pay for the parking, and it'll meter how long the car is there. And when I get back in the car and drive away, it'll stop paying for parking. That's the sort of service, right, that really brings value and added convenience to the owner or the user of the vehicle, and is the sort of thing that people are going to want to pay for, right?
So OEMs, software-defined vehicles, the latest automotive trends, how does it all relate to RTI's vision for automotive in regards to what we have today and what we're building for tomorrow?
So I think, our vision for the automotive industry is more an architectural vision, right? We've had a lot of experience, as you alluded to before, right, in a lot of other industries that have gone through these sort of very complex transitions from more traditional sort of static architectures to sort of software-defined architectures, right? And in order to help you through that and get through that effectively, having a more data-centric mindset and looking at it from a more data-centric architecture perspective really helps you get through that transition and move through that transition effectively and get you through to a quality product on the other side. And it's more about thinking about, what data flows do I need, right? What sensors have I got on the car? What applications are going to be wanting to use those? And then, architecting a system with that in mind first, right? And then kind of architecting the hardware that supports that architecture sort of second. Very often we architect the hardware first and we worry about the data second, right? So you kind of need to flip that around and do it around the other way, right? But I think if you do that, then, the OEMs can ensure no matter what happens with that vehicle, right, they will have the data that they need available to them or available to applications when they need it. And it doesn't really matter where the application is, right? The application can be in the vehicle or it can be in the cloud. If you're running DDS, right, I can start an application in the cloud, trial it maybe in the cloud. Okay, this is working well. I want to move this down to the vehicle. Arguably, I could move, applications in the vehicle back up to the cloud, which then gives the OEMs flexibility to architect the overall system for lowest operational cost, right? How do I move the least amount of data across the wide area network to optimize my data costs to the car and things like that? So I think our vision is that you can architect and build a system where the data is available anywhere to any application that needs it. And once you've kind of built that, the possibilities really open up for the things that you can do and the sort of services and the applications that you can bring down into the vehicle.
What would be the most difficult problem that our customers are trying to solve, and why are they turning to RTI to help them solve it?
Well, I think one of the most difficult problems that customers have, right, obviously is autonomy, right? We all know that autonomy's gone through its hype cycle, right, and potentially it's kind of gone back out into the future somewhat, right? And I don't think it's gone away, right? What's happened is it's really gone to more of a sort of a highway assist, on-ramp, off-ramp type of solution, right? That you can subscribe to or not, right? So, hey, I want to drive, 5 hours because I've, rented a cottage in the mountains. I can get on the highway, push a button on the dash. It'll do 4 hours of the drive for me or however long I'm on the highway for. I can sit back and relax. I'm going on holiday. I don't want to have a stressful drive to start off and then jump off at the other end and do the last sort of mile myself, up to the cabin in the hills sort of thing. Now, that's difficult because there's a lot of, obviously, safety critical, timing constraints, all this kind of stuff, right? So, I mean, we're really helping customers, and this is where kind of RTI's DDS really shines, right? In that we have safety certified variants, 26262 up to ASIL D, variants of the software available to our customers, right? And we are the first provider in the automotive space that's certified DDS solutions to 26262. We also are qualifying to the latest and greatest cybersecurity standards, right? So one of the other huge challenges, right, is the European Union has just brought out new laws regarding cybersecurity. The requirement there is now for OEMs to support cybersecurity patches for their vehicles, all the vehicles that they sell on the road, literally until no one's driving those cars anymore. So, if there's, in theory, one person driving your car around Europe, you've got to maintain cybersecurity compliance and provide that one vehicle cybersecurity patches. So by obviously moving our solution towards the latest cybersecurity standards in the industry, we're helping with that path. We're making that easier from an OEM perspective. So those are two probably the biggest challenges in the industry that we're certainly helping OEMs with.
Right. What is it about the current automotive landscape that keeps you up at night? Not to bring up your sleepless nights and have you relive them, but what's your vision for the industry looking forward?
I think that one of the biggest things is that, OEMs are trying to build software-defined vehicles. And if you think about the software-defined vehicle, historically the car industry has kind of been very vertically orientated, right? They've tried to do everything themselves. You go back, 60, 70 years, right? They were literally building their own tires and their own engines and their own sheet metal and everything, right? I think in the world of software, right, it tends to be a lot more about collaboration, right? How do we kind of, crack that nut through working together, right? What's the real value add that the OEM brings, right? And what is the sort of standardized pieces? Like you see a lot of OEMs at the moment trying to build their own sort of OS or architectures, internally in-house. They're spending an awful lot of time and effort and manpower and money building some of the layers of that architecture that, the customer doesn't really see, touch, and feel, right? I mean, the value really is in the application and the user interface and the brand experience that they're bringing to that whole thing, right? Hence why, RTI is involved in things like Covesa, right? Trying to define a standardized signal specification for the car isn't necessarily differentiating from an OEM perspective, right? The fact that your, a front camera signal is defined as, front camera, is fairly, non-differentiating. But, if the industry can do something like that and standardize on some of those non-differentiating layers, then it makes it much, much easier for, third-party app developers to come in, write an application, and, subscribe to the right data sources that it needs and knows that that application will work across different brands of vehicles. There's an awful lot of app developers in the phone space, but the reality is the phone industry is, 1 billion phones a year, right? There's an awfully big market out there. The automotive space, I think, is about 70 million vehicles a year, which includes a lot of buses and lorries and other things like that, right? So, it's much, much smaller. And so I think collaborating to enable sort of third-party developers to expand the footprint across multiple brands will help a lot. So, one of the things that, sort of keeps me up at night, right, is really sort of, is the industry moving towards the sort of that collaboration space that is really going to help everybody sort of move forward in sort of a differentiated ways that each of those companies and each of those brands can bring their own unique flavor to the vehicles that they produce.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of Software Defined Everything. Thomas, it's been great having you on the podcast, and thanks so much for joining us. Where can people go to learn more about RTI in automotive?
I think the best place is just go to our website, right? We have automotive specific pages on that. They've got a bunch of information there about the products that we do and a bunch of blogs and white papers and things like that. So I would just point them at the rti.com website.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap up, I've got one last question for you. What's one recommendation you have for our listeners? It could be anything. It could be a book, a travel destination, maybe a favorite restaurant in your area. Anything that you think is worth sharing with our audience?
That's okay. That's a surprise question at the end there. I think if you want a travel destination, anywhere in the Rockies, the Canadian Rockies, the US Rockies, I love sort of getting outside and experiencing the big mountains. Maybe hiking up them not so much, but certainly hiking down them is pretty good. But some of the spectacular scenery and wildlife that you can see out on the west, on the Rockies or the Canadian Rockies, it's certainly well worth going to see. Right, we were fortunate enough, actually, this Canada Day in 4th of July to spend some time out west. We saw loads of different, loads of wildlife and had some spectacular scenery. So certainly get out west, get into the hills, have a good time.
Definitely sounds amazing. Well, once again, thank you, Thomas, for coming onto the podcast, and we hope to have you on again soon. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks very much.